Hey, boys and girls. This week, we're going to focus on the story, The Invisible Boy by Trudy Ludwig. And I know that I have read this book to my class, but we didn't really dive into the story. We just read it as a read aloud one day, really towards the beginning of the school year. So we're going to focus on this book again. And I want you today, really, and every day, to be thinking about the illustrations in this particular story, okay, and every story that you ever listen to, because the illustrations are part of the story. They tell a lot about what's happening, and I want you to pay attention to that this week in particular when we answer some questions and do some activities regarding this particular read aloud. Okay, I'm not going to say a whole lot today other than read the story. I'll point some things out, but I want you to do your own thinking. And then you're going to have some questions to answer today and some other activities to do this week. All right. But I want you to be paying attention because as a reader, right, you can use a lot of things that you learn in a story in your own writing. And I want you to be able to pull out of this book some really great things that you can put in your own stories. Okay, first of all, I want you to notice on the inside cover, here is the main character. And I want you just to notice what he's doing. Okay, and one of the things that authors do in a story is they give us information before they're really ready to start talking about it. Okay, it's called foreshadowing. And as you kind of look at what's happening on the pages, the deeper we get into the book, you're going to notice some things that happen and you're like, oh, wait a minute. I remember back, 3 or 4 pages, you noticed something. So I want you to be paying attention, right? How illustrations can make a huge impact in a story. So here's that character drawing a circle out of chalk. It's called The Invisible Boy by Trudy Ludwig. It's illustrated by Patrice Barton. Can you see Brian, the invisible boy? Even Mrs. Carlotti has trouble noticing him in her classroom. She's too busy dealing with Nathan and Sophie. Do you see Nathan and Sophie? They're kind of hard to miss, aren't they? Look at what the illustrator did, right? You can see these kids are being really loud, right? Look at what's happening around them in the story, in the illustrations. You can kind of see that noise, right? Even though we can't hear anything. I want you to pay attention to what they're wearing, right? And look at the other children in the classroom. There's a little girl in a blue dress at the end. Okay, I bet you can see Brian. Think about how he looks different than the other students. Nathan has problems with what Mrs. Carlotti calls volume control. He uses his outside voice inside too much. Sophie whines and complains when she doesn't get her way. Nathan and Sophie take up a lot of space. Brian doesn't. I'll notice they're really big on this page. He's kind of tiny. When the bell rings for recess, Micah and JT take turns choosing the kids for their kickball teams. The best players get picked first. Then, the best friends of the best players. There's that little girl in the blue dress again. She was the one at the end of the line. Then, the friends of the best friends. Only Brian is left, still waiting and hoping. There's that little girl in the blue dress again. She's kind of paying attention to the birds. Who's got that flower in her hand now? Look at Brian's face. You need to pay attention to the characters and their facial expressions in the illustrations. Right? What are they looking like on their face? How does that help you understand what they're thinking? JT glances in Brian's direction and, just as quickly, looks away. We've got enough players for each team, he tells the others. Let's play ball. So I said to look at their facial expressions. I also want you to look at their body language. Okay, what does that tell you about how they're feeling? You can see their faces and what they're doing with their bodies. Look at Brian. What is his face telling you? If you could put a little thought bubble up here, what would he be saying? The author's not telling you anything, but I bet you're thinking some things. Look at his body language. His hands are in his pocket. He looks like he's kind of mopey. In the cafeteria, Madison and her friends talk about her birthday party. The rope swing over the pool was awesome, says JT. Yeah, so was the water slide, adds Fiona. That was the best pool party ever. I'm so glad you guys had fun, said Madison. Everybody did, except Brian. He wasn't invited. At choosing time, while the other kids play board games and read, Brian sits at his table, doing what he loves to do best. He draws fire-breathing dragons scaling tall buildings. Look at the look on his face. So he's drawing, right? And this is what's in his mind, his imagination of what he's going to draw. So, thank you for toasting my marshmallow. What kind of a dragon is that? We know he's fire-breathing. Does he look like a mean dragon? I don't think so. Over here, he's drawing space aliens locked in intergalactic battles. I've got you now. The spaceship, right? He's kind of helping the alien. Greedy pirates digging for treasure. Get that pirate's like crackers. Arr! But the parrot is saying, yay! Why would a parrot be excited for crackers? Have you ever heard that saying, Polly want a cracker? And then finally at the bottom, he's also drawing superheroes with the power to make friends wherever they go. Here's a superhero with the letter B on his chest. Who do you suppose that is? Looks an awful lot like this character. I almost think that Brian's drawing a picture of himself, right? A self-portrait. And the new friend says, hi, friend, have a cookie. I think Brian's drawing happy things, pleasant things. This dragon seems to be helping kind of as a hero. He's being saved, right, by the spaceship. The parrot's very happy. And of course, being a friend is a really good thing. On Monday morning, Mrs. Carlotti introduces Justin, a new friend, to the class. Brian smiles shyly at him. Some of the other kids sneak looks at Justin, trying to figure out if he's cool enough to be their friend. They haven't quite made up their minds yet. Remember how I said to look at their facial expressions and their body language, what they're doing? Right? This little guy is kind of half looking like he's not quite sure. A couple friends are kind of hiding behind a book. Right? This guy's just barely looking up at the new student. This is Justin. They all seem to have puzzled looks on their face, not quite sure what they think. All except Brian. Do you notice anything else about Brian? How is he changing? At lunch, Madison and JT watch Justin eat with chopsticks. What's that? Asks Madison as she points at Justin's food. It's bulgogi. Bull what? Look at their faces. Would you like to see friends look at you that way? Here they all are, around the lunch table. Notice that Brian is sitting by himself. Look at his lunch bag. Look at their faces, their expressions. Here's what Brian is saying. Or not Brian, but Justin, the new boy. Bulgogi. It's Korean barbecued beef. My grandma made it for me. It's really good. Do you want to try some? There's no way I'd eat boogergi. And the kids laugh. All of them, that is, except Brian. He sits there wondering which is worse, being laughed at or feeling invisible. I wonder what your opinion is. Which would be worse? The next day, when Justin goes to his cubby to put away his backpack, he notices a piece of paper with his name on it. Justin, I thought the bulgogi looked good. Brian. Who is that in the picture? I look back at the illustrations. Looks like Brian drew a picture of himself eating the bulgogi, the barbecued Korean beef. Even the facial expression in his picture looks happy, right? He likes it. At morning recess, Brian finds a piece of chalk on the ground and starts drawing away. You're Brian, right? Yeah. Thanks for the note. What's he drawing? Chalk on the ground. Hey, Justin, Emilio calls out from the tetherball court. You're up next. Sorry, I gotta go, says Justin. By the way, that's a really cool drawing, he adds before taking off. What do you think Justin wanted to do? Do you think he wanted to stay and draw with Brian, or do you think he wanted to go play tetherball? Right, Emilio's way over here. Look at the illustration. It's an interesting picture of what's happening. Back in class, Mrs. Carlotti asks the kids to team up in twos or threes for a special project. The kids scurry around the room to pair off. Brian heads toward Justin. I'm already with Justin, says Emilio. Find someone else. Look at how Emilio has his arm around Justin, kind of grabbing at him, pulling him his direction. Look at his face. If he had a bubble above his head, what would Justin be saying right now? Brian looks at the floor, wishing he could draw a hole right there to swallow him up. So this is what Brian's imagining in his head. Do you remember when I told you that authors do something called foreshadowing? They give us a little glimpse, right, ahead before they're ready to start talking about it. What's he drawing on that very first page? We know he's using chalk. Looks like he's drawing a hole. Here's Justin. Look what he says. Mrs. Carlotti said we can have up to 3 people in our group. We're only 2. Come on, Emilio. Let him work with us. Okay, I guess. What's happening to Brian? How's he different from the illustration here? Mrs. Carlotti gives the class directions for the project. Your assignment is to work together to write a story about what you see in that photograph. Use your imagination and have fun. So she gives them this photo. Whoa, cool, says Amelia. What kind of people do you think would live in houses like that? I don't know, but I bet Brian could draw them to go with our story, says Justin. Justin has noticed that Brian's really good at art. Remember, he compliments him on the playground. Brian smiles as he takes out his lucky pen. Look at Brian now. Here they are, working together. There's his lucky pen. Got to look really closely at all of these illustrations. The crooked story we made up on the spot. So here they are presenting their story with all of their artwork. So it looks like Justin is reading. Brian and Emilio are sharing, right, their artwork. It's lunchtime again, Brian's least favorite part of the day. Another 20 long minutes of kids talking and laughing with everyone else but him. Brian, he hears someone shout. Hey, Brian, over here. Brian turns and sees Justin waving him over. Emilio nods at Brian as he makes room for him at the table. So here he is walking into the lunchroom, not feeling so great until he sees Justin, right, flagging him down. What he says to him. Cookie? Thanks. Maybe, just maybe, Brian's not so invisible after all. Do you remember the other part in the story? When there was a cookie? Remember when Brian was drawing? Because that's the thing he loves to do more than anything. Here's that superhero, right? Making new friends. And the friend is giving him a cookie. Do you think Brian's feeling like a superhero at the end of the story? There's his lunch bag again, too. Right? Do you think he drew that? We know how much he loves to draw. So thinking about this story, there's a lot of information in there, right? We'll talk more about it this week, but I want you to think about Brian. How does he feel in the story, right? The word invisible means, right, to not be seen. So think about how he feels in the story. Look at, he's drawing here. We don't know if he's drawing another circle. Remember, he wanted to just disappear into that circle because he didn't feel seen.